they would send artists out to paint portraits of women who were going to be prospective wives. Because if they had their own artists send things, they were finding that these portraits that came in looked nothing like the women when they actually came to marry. So, I mean, the artists have always had that power, though. I mean, pay them enough money, they'll make you taller, they'll make you thinner, they'll make you younger. And so many of these very historic portraits we look at look nothing like, especially the men, look nothing like these men. They just like
nice dig there. Today, my guest is Danielle Winger, and that name I have an impulse to say Danielle because I knew a girl in Miami. That's why I asked to make sure. But speaking of places, where are you from originally?
Well, that's a good question. So I'm born in Reno, Nevada,
cool.
But I moved every 2 years growing up. My dad ran casinos, so Reno, Las Vegas, Kansas City, New Orleans. I've kind of been everywhere.
My God, you just named off like mob cities, which is great.
Right.
And where are you now? Where do you live now?
So I live in a very small town called LaFountain, Indiana. It's northern Indiana. It's about an hour south of Fort Wayne and an hour and a half north of Indianapolis.
Okay, Fort Wayne. I have no idea what that is.
It's northern Indiana.
So I'm glad you said Indiana.
It's almost Michigan. It's almost Michigan, basically.
Almost Michigan. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So it's how long have you been in Indiana now? And also, where do you consider like home? Or I'm guessing your family somewhere, maybe that's where you consider home, or is that like not correct?
You know, what's so funny is that I actually wrote my entire undergraduate thesis about what the construct of home means, because I don't consider anywhere home. So my mom and my brother live in Nashville. My sister lives in Austin, Texas. My dad and his wife live out in Denver. If I had to consider myself from anywhere, I think I would say Nashville, mostly because that's the longest I lived anywhere as like a childhood home, kind of. I moved there when I was 16, and my family, most of them stayed there. My dad just recently moved out of there.
That makes sense, because that's like high school.
But it was my third high school, so it's not like I was super, I didn't consider that to be like.
Yeah, but that's when you start to, I meant it more in terms of like, no, I'm not like super loyal to my high school either. But I meant it more in terms of like, how like when you're 16, you become like essentially an adult. That's when you start to sort of get your shit together for the first time and start to think independently and stuff. So it would make sense. Is that when
that happens?
I mean, for me it did. Maybe not. But that was only the first wave of that, like I'm saying like
early bloomer apparently.
No, I'm a late bloomer in other aspects. I just mean like that's when the first, I don't know, for me 15 was pretty rough, 14 was pretty rough, like
I feel like it was all rough.
Really? I think around 17 I started to just chill out and be cool. But then I lost it. Kind of like what's it called? The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. I don't know, the Roald Dahl. I know he's problematic now, but
oh yeah. Yeah.
There's or actually no, I'm thinking of Siddhartha, which is like where he's like a genius kind of present enlightened kid when he's young and everybody's like fascinated by him, but then eventually he grows up and he has a miserable fucking life, and then like essentially the point of the book is that even though he has like he just becomes a bad person and he gets corrupted by like life, eventually he's able to find his way back, essentially. Spoiler alert. But
so real American story, just all around.
Yeah, exactly. But what's it called? Okay, so do you want to get into your topic?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny you asked where I was from, because that's such a like a seed of where I start with any of my paintings. That was what my entire undergraduate and graduate was about, was making these paintings about home. It's my baby crying in the background, just so you know. It's been a weird day. My daughter, she's 6 weeks old, and she just had a tongue tie and a lip tie revision today.
What does that
mean?
And
so it's where you take them to a dentist and they use a laser to actually cut the part under your tongue and on your lip. So that because her mouth basically
right here and then under the tongue, that little fin that attaches web.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she's had a rough day. She's tiny and in a lot of pain. So my husband's actually with her, and I know, but she honestly, it causes so many issues going forward. Like, she was not gaining weight. She was a preemie. She wasn't gaining weight. So they caused that issue. We breastfeed. She wasn't able to latch. So this was something, I mean, we had to do it. So it stinks, but bad day for her. Anyway, so I chose, it's kind of a roundabout, loose, because there's such a depth to this idea.
It's a big ask to put together a topic. You're fine.
Mm-hmm. So I chose color psychology because it plays such a huge role in my work. And I teach color theory. I've taught it for years. And I teach at a local community college and another small college in Ohio. And teaching color theory, honestly, I felt like, because I teach non-art majors, so they don't really care that much. You eventually get a student here or there that, really attaches to the information and, get something out of it. But for the most part, I teach nursing majors or education majors, people who are just getting their humanities credit. Mm-hmm. So I've actually felt like I've gotten more out of teaching this course than my students do, because I'm constantly inundated with all of this technical information about how color works in art. Mm-hmm. And, color psychology is used in marketing and in just ways of influencing here and there. We don't realize just how much we are influenced by what we choose to wear, what we choose to eat, how we feel about something. There's several very famous films that you can watch. You say, they're using this like blue and orange complementary color scheme, and it's affecting our mood and the way we're reacting to this. And then, you have artists that go through famous periods like Picasso's blue period, and you see how color is used to utilize certain emotions. But for me, my work has always been about home, nostalgia, memory. I'm unapologetically sentimental in my work. I refer to myself as a poet painter. Mm-hmm. All of my paintings are actually directly titled after parts of poems. And it's usually, they're very direct. It's usually Sylvia Plath or Emily Dickinson or Oscar Wilde. So they're very known poets. Can
I step in and just so that I have a better context? I actually really have no idea what Sylvia Plath and writes about. Like, what is her poetry about? Just so that I have a context.
Oh, it's dark. It's super dark.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said Emily Dickinson?
Yeah.
Okay, because literally my experience of that is that a Simon and Garfunkel lyric where he's like, it's really pretentious, where he's like saying, and you read your Emily Dickinson, and I'm going to say Robert Frost because it fits.
Oh gosh.
But I literally thought about that lyric the other day, and I was like, what the fuck do these people write about? I mean, I know what Robert Frost writes about.
See, but and that's artists get in these zones, and I find myself in like normal conversations where I'll like make a pun, and someone's like, I don't get it. I'm like, like Dickinson. And they're like, no, I don't know. Yeah. But I'm like 90% of other people's conversations. I don't understand movie references.
Yeah.
I haven't seen some of the biggest, some of like the like ultimate movies. like I was 25 when I first saw, what is that kid's baseball movie? Sandlot. 25.
I mean, that one's, I'm not, you get a pass on that, because I don't think that's like that seminal a movie or like that, even that classic. Like, it's all right.
What's the, starts with a G. It's like a boy, it's a kid movie, but it's the Goonies, that too. I was that same night. I saw that for the first time.
Okay. That one is a little bit more shocking. Yeah.
I mean, for my generation, I felt like people looked at me like I had 3 heads, that I hadn't seen this.
No, that one is like, what kind of parents did you have is the question, that the subtle
they
question.
They ran casinos. I don't know. You tell
me. They're not into kids movies.
No,
so
they're
what were you
not.
watching,
really
Godfather?
I lived Godfather. No, I'm kidding.
I could have just gone with Casino, which is the actual more relevant movie. But
yeah, that's true.
Even that one seems a little, because I watched Godfather when I was a kid. I think Casino's a little bit like, it's heavy, bro.
Yeah.
The pen stabbings and all of that. I didn't watch Goodfellas until later. But anyway, let's get back to color psychology. I mean, it's not that it's not related, but I won't make the reach and like do all the effort to connect what we were just talking about in this, because
yeah.
Let's just get back to it.
Yeah. So, when I first started painting, gosh, I was really late to painting. Mm-hmm. I was 23 before I ever.
I mean, it's not like you're a gymnast, like...
I was a gymnast for 12 years, actually, and I quit. I quit the year that Dominic Moceanu made it to the Olympics at 14. I think I was 15, and I was like, shit, like I'm never going to make it. So I'm just going to quit. So I just quit.
I think painting is a little bit like more flexible. When you said 23, I was like, what? That's like not that.
Well, because most painters are like, oh, I knew I was going to be a painter since I was like 3 years old.
Oh, well, fuck painters then.
You go to art school and they're all like, you've never painted before? I've been painting since I was 8.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, okay,
art school people. Art school is not a real world.
It's not a real world. It really isn't. No. Yeah. So when I came in, honestly, like I came in like 3 weeks and I was like, I want to get my MFA. And people were like, you don't even have a BFA, because I went to school for fashion design. Like I didn't go to school for painting.
I mean, that's like close enough, right? Like it's design at least.
It is. I actually hate sewing too.
Yeah.
So that was never going to work out.
And it's 3D. It's like, I don't know. I don't think that's that preposterous.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard people get MFAs with less relevant, to art field BAs, right?
But it usually makes them more interesting. I never really incorporated the textile. I would say color theory stayed very strong in the work post fashion design, because that was also a really big part of trend forecasting and things like that, was understanding color theory.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you mentioned that is like, because that was one of the things that I was like, oh, okay. The fact that it's used by ad agencies, like, all of that is like, it's interesting. Since we're talking about it, like I think that like there's a lot of stuff where I don't know if now people are just more savvy about images, or if it's like a both things at the same time, where people are both aware of images, but then also deeply affected by like Instagram and whatnot, even though they know how it's not reality, right? Like, so it's crazy, because when I was in school, like they taught us basically that like a photograph is not the thing, and it's like it's not that like, it's not like mind blowing, but it is an important detail in how you phrase your discussions about things, right? You sort of have to acknowledge the photograph as an object before you start talking about its content. So it's interesting to sort of like just think about how that is also a thing that is manipulative, that can be used against you, that you're like, I'm not thinking about like, how are these colors affecting me and making me want to buy this thing.
You say that because you're talking about like the simulacra, and then the anemic image, the two things where it's like, where when something becomes an image of a thing, like think about George Washington on the dollar bill. That's who we see as George Washington. But we also know that looks very little to what he actually looked like. That's what he wanted to be drawn as. But he actually was smaller. He had a lot of acne, so he was pockmarked. He had all these things that he didn't want to be remembered as. So now he is what he is as a statue. So that
right there is so crazy too. Just like how you would be like, I don't want, I want to erase this part from, like, that's not a power we've ever had, right? I've always had to deal with how I look in photographs.
But artists always had that power. I mean, artists there's a part that I teach you on my color theory, and I can't remember what. I mean, it happened all throughout history, but basically they would send artists out to paint portraits of women who were going to be prospective wives. Because if they had their own artists send things, they were finding that these portraits that came in looked nothing like the women when they actually came to marry. So, I mean, the artists have always had that power, though. I mean, pay them enough money, they'll make you taller, they'll make you thinner, they'll make you younger. And so many of these very historic portraits we look at look nothing like, especially the men, look nothing like these men. They just like
nice dig there.
But it's true. That's what
it's true because they're the ones that had the money back then, right?
It's like you had to do something really fancy to be a female who got a portrait. But
no, that's what I'm saying. Like they're the ones that had the cash because we talked over each other. Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. But even those are things that, like, you know, like that's an example of something that I just don't think about because I don't study painting, right? Or and so, like, I mean, that's something that doesn't surprise me, and maybe I learned it at some point and I've forgotten the fact. But to hear it again, it's not mind blowing. But the thing that is mind blowing is when you were talking about George Washington, the idea of, like, essentially photoshopping yourself for posterity, right? Yeah. Whereas, like, I get, like, that's still a thing where you know, and that is sort of the surreal part of Instagram that I was, like, referencing earlier. But at the same time, I think that, like, I don't know. I don't think that those images are being painted taken for their legacy, or maybe they are. Maybe people are aware of their legacy because people are very aware of the brand. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to think about because I've never.
They were.
What's that?
Historically, I think they were. Historically, I think.
No. I mean, contemporarily, do people? Is it the same thing? Like, because I was gonna say, like, oh, people show their pictures pockmarked, but then I'm like, no, but there's a whole subset of people that don't. It's just an interesting thing to consider. Like, but I'm thinking more in our generation where, like, you're dealing with cameras that, like, we didn't really have access to Photoshop in our generation, right? So, like, what you look like is what you look like, right? So from that context, that's crazy to me, you know? But then it's also crazy to think that there's a generation that is used to thinking of themselves as, like, oh, I can just, like, get that, you know, fix that little thing.
When you bring up, like, Instagram and you talk about the way people don't even realize they're using color theory when they are using those apps. Like, the filters on Instagram are literally just harmonizing colors. So you have, like, a blue overlay or a green overlay, and it will give an orange or a green underlay to it. So you're just harmonizing two complementary colors to make it flashy and to basically smooth the whole thing out. But you're using color, and some people go towards, you know, a warmer filter or a cooler filter. And that's where it's in those situations where color theory plays into it, because who you are as a person is how you're going to gravitate towards certain things, because you want a mood of a photo. You want it to portray some sort of feeling. Are you feeling sexy? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling flirty? I mean, all these things, and each person associates a different color to those things. And so there's a lot going into those decisions that, you know, they're subconscious. But as an artist, you know, you can, for me, I'm a very intuitive person. So I can pick up on those things personality wise with somebody, if that they're just the way they choose colors, the way they portray themselves through color.
So what would you say about me in my room? Because there's definitely some color in here.
I mean, I have this blue thing happening at the door back here. I'm like, is it laying over the door? Is it behind the door? Is it?
It's one of those planetarium style, like, projector lights that's projecting on the wall.
My kids would love it.
And then there's a little purple over here in the corner, and
and the green right behind your head.
Just to cover up this atrocious looking furnace that sits behind me. Or it's a radiator that is just like, it's crazy. But yeah, that's interesting. So, like, do you Does it get formulaic? Is there like a way that you can be like, well, like, you know, orange makes you sort of tend to feel these kinds of things. You associate these kinds of things with it. Like in terms of, I mean, I know you're not in advertising, even though you referenced it. So is there, from your design background specifically, is there anything there that like, or am I not thinking about color correctly, color psychology correctly?
That's right. That's definitely there. I mean, so for me with color, I actually, when I got obsessive with color.
Okay.
Because I had a very hard time seeing value as a painter in the very beginning.
Okay.
And so I overcompensated that by using a bunch of colors to give warm and cool as ways to talk about value. But it wasn't, you know, it didn't give that like hard punch of like, this person understands light. You know, there was no like John Singer Sargent to it. It was like, this girl uses a lot of color to overcompensate. Any good painter could look at my work and see that that's what I was doing. Okay. Or at least that's what I felt about it. So I became super obsessive with painters who really understood light and how to, you know, how to use color very minimally, but very powerfully at the same time.
So like who? Hudson River school painters?
I actually looked at more like contemporary painters like Jeremy Murray. And his work is incredible. It is the way he understands light, the way that and Sophie Treppendahl, she does it in a very kind of like muted down Matisse kind of way. Mm-hmm. But I was really looking at my contemporaries and how they were using color. So I forced myself to this place where I would only use very restricted color schemes, just a blue and orange. And I really do gravitate towards complementaries because I still enjoy that kind of powerful color relationship where a complementary color scheme is going to be the most powerful color scheme. And that's the colors that are across the color wheel from each other. So red and green, blue and orange, purple, yellow. And you can immediately stop and associate those things with Christmas, Mardi Gras. I think there's like an Alabama football team, Auburn, or I don't do sports, but one of them has orange and blue. My husband would kill me because he's all about sports, and I love
how you don't do sports encompasses like you don't play sports, you don't like,
I know.
You don't watch them, you're not aware of them.
I live in Indiana. I'm very aware of them. It's all people have to do around here is like watch sports. So that's all they do. Everything's like around sports, the Colts and the Pacers. My husband's a Purdue fan.
Pacers? Oh, the basketball team.
The basketball team. Yeah. I think about all these sports teams in colors. So it's like the second you tell me what the team is, I think of like what their mascot is.
What is okay, let's do a fun quiz. What's because since this is the only sports trivia we care about. No, I mean I used to be really into sports, especially when I was younger. Like it was part of my assimilation process. So I got and Miami at the time was getting like every expansion team. They had the Heat already. They had the Dolphins already. But there's this rich millionaire, Wayne Huizenga, who was the person that brought us Blockbuster Music. Do you remember Blockbuster Music?
I don't, no.
Oh, Blockbuster Music was the place where you could go and listen to CDs before you bought them. And it went under.
What year was this?
Huh?
What year was this?
90s, yeah. And then so then Miami got the Marlins and then the Panthers. So I got completely sucked in. I was like a multi-sport fan.
Marlins like teal and purple?
Is it purple? Huh. That's a good. Maybe I actually don't know. All right, so Marlins. What about Dolphins? I think Dolphins is teal
and orange, or like a blue and orange, but tealish.
All right. Yeah, it's actually just kind of teal, and there's not really purple for the Marlins. It's teal and black essentially, and then and then I think the Dolphins are right. All right, let's see. Well, I don't actually know enough teams to just name them off, but I did want to know what colors are the Pacers?
They're a gold and a navy blue.
And a navy blue. Let's just let the artist listener decide if it's right or wrong, so I don't have to like research it. Okay, and then Miami Heat.
Oh, I've actually been to a Miami Heat game before too. I don't know. I want to go with orange.
Orange and black. Halloween.
It's
no,
it's
Yeah, or maybe like red too, somewhere in there.
I actually went when Shaq played for them, right? Because I went and I saw Shaq on the court. I think he was playing for that team. Okay.
Yeah, he was definitely playing for that team because he used to play for the Magic.
Professional basketball game I've ever been to.
It's fun though, right? Like when you're there, it's
going. Yeah, I mean, I'm not like anti-sports. It's just like it's a lot of rules and a lot of things to understand. And I'm someone's like, I don't want to watch something I don't understand, and so I'm not. Because I'm gonna ask all the questions.
If you get me to, if you get me, no, I could see. I'm also, I would also be that person in a space where I was like not aware of what's going on. So I could totally, I could.
Poetry, basketball is poetry. I'm like, is it though? Like, is it actually poetry?
It is also really weird that it's like a bunch of
around a lot. So.
Yeah, it's just weird that it's like so many people that couldn't possibly do this, putting pressure on people that can, and then getting angry at them that when they don't.
I'm like, you're mad at these people for playing a game you could never possibly play.
Actually, I think Serena Williams just laid it down in an interview. I'm going to paraphrase it, but she was basically like, yeah, whenever people write mean things about me, I just remember that none of these people could play anywhere near as good.
Like 6 months pregnant too. She's like, not only
exactly.
Pregnant.
So I don't know. That to me, that's hilarious. Anyway, that concludes our sports segment of What's My Thesis. We can get back into the art for everybody that was pulling their hairs out. All right. So, okay. I'm trying to think. So like when I was a baby, I was really into this color behind me, green, right? Like my parents just tell me that because like it was just like what I gravitated towards. Like, I literally took a bite out of a foam football American football that was green, and it like passed through me.
It's still there.
I hope not. It's in my colon. That's my downfall. Like if I die right now. What's that?
Actually growing as a tumor now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let's not play with fate. You get to that's a very much our age thing. When I was like younger, I was like, fuck fate.
Yeah, now you're like, let's not go there.
No, I don't need to fuck with however this thing works. But yeah. So I mean, I was obsessed with it, and I mean, I'm still very much a green person. I think there's a lot of colors. I think that as I've grown older, there's things that I don't like in green, which is a surprising thing. Like I'm not always a fan of the color of the greens that they choose for cars. Even though I used to have a green car, I had a 1970 Dodge Dart, which kind of looked like a Barracuda, but it was nowhere near as like dope. It was still dope, but it was not a muscle car. And so that car was cool. It had this like avocado color to it, so we called it, or I called it the lawn dart, because it spent. Yeah, but yeah, the color's interesting to me because I think my tastes in it have changed. I wonder if that has. Do you think that has to do, like, because you were talking about personality? I still love green. I do acknowledge that there's maybe more shades of blue, more hues of blue that I like than there's like definitely a lot of ugly greens. Whereas
Sure. But then you'll find yourself gravitating towards an ugly green. I mean, color is seasonal. Like it is like anything else. And so for me, I mean, color psychology in my work functions as it's very intuitive. I don't go into a painting and say, I'm going to make this all in blues. I mean, I do a lot of sketching. I typically know if I'm going to go for a nocturnal scene or a day scene. Recently, I've been very much into the nocturnal scenes. And I think because there's such a mood to a night painting that it's hard to capture in a day painting. I mean, and also day paintings are really happy. And I think especially, since COVID, I felt very moody, and doing a lot of night paintings was a way that I, worked through that.
Strictly on a color sense, what's interesting about a night painting is that you're going from vivid, vibrant colors to like darkness, where it's like everything is graying. So I can see that being also just like technically a different process experience.
Oh yeah.
Where you're like mixing a lot of muddy or like, you know, or darker tinted stuff where I can imagine, like the other day I was really upset and I started playing my guitar. I can imagine, and it made me feel better, you know, like I can imagine those little things, like sometimes it can possibly be validating, maybe, to sort of like dwell on those colors, and then now you're like, yeah.
Exactly. And I'm like listening to Damien Rice in my ear, and I'm like, oh.
Who's Damien Rice? What does he talk about?
What? No, music.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I don't even know who Mac DeMarco is. And there we go. I'm stuck.
There we go. No,
You know who Dominic Fike? I think that's the most contemporary person that I listen to that's in the pop genre.
Oh, Damien Rice is not contemporary. He's he's like the emo stages of like the early 2000s. I mean, he's around, but he's
my 2000
professional and like Jack Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in that like realm of like, he's on Hollister lists, you know. He's definitely like where you can.
Yeah, I think in the early aughts, because of where I was living, I was listening to a lot more like Creed style, like radio rock, and it was terrible. But I still have my like, I love that song One. My
husband would be best friends because like he's always just listening to like terrible rock and roll, and he's like, your music's depressing.
Well, it's just because it was a habit that like I just was used to listening to FM radio, and there were no pod anything, you know, like you didn't have streaming music at the time, so it was very much of the moment, and I was very frustrated with it. But it was like Third Eye Blind and like that, you know. I don't hate some of that music now. I like don't even ironically appreciate it. I was like, no, those songs, like I bonded with them, and like when they came on at the time, it may have been like ironic because Creed is so Creed, but like I like that song, like legit. You put it on, it's like it builds up, and then you're like, run!
It makes you want to go running or something, get your adrenaline out.
Well, it makes me think of being in a car, but rolling hills. So yeah, it's similar, you know, similar vibe. But yeah, like, and you know, I have no like regrets for for like liking it or even stating that publicly, because.
You're not saying Rascal Flatts, you're saying Creed, you know. So
I mean, I'm into like a lot of different shit, but like I can indulge in some of the stuff that like is cringe, you know. Like Creed is definitely cringe.
Yes, definitely. I'm the laziest music listener because I just go to Pandora Radio and I put in like a song or a band that I do like, and I let them make the whole playlist. I don't even know half the crap I listen to.
Oh, really? Sometimes you just know. You're just like.
Billie Eilish. I was like, who's this person? And it, like there was a couple songs that I really liked, and I was like, who am I listening to? And I was like, that's why everyone likes her, because she's like popping up on my playlist.
Yeah, she's cool. It's interesting with her. I like, especially she actually had the green hair for a while, and like, but with the roots.
And that was the green that you did like, or you didn't like?
No, I mean, I say there's ugly greens. I don't mean that I hate green. Like, there's no green that I'm like, no. Like, for context, like, yeah, I'll reject it because that's part of the art process, right? Like, I wouldn't, you know, like, I mean, my point is that there's a lot of ugly green guitars that I've seen. Right? Like, you know, just since I just looked at the screen and saw the guitars behind me, right? Like there's a lot of them that, and I think that I just bought this guitar here. Let me show you my guitar so you guys can see. It's called Miami Blue for if you're listening at home. All right. So I have, it's not going to come across that well on the video. This guitar is all over the place right now. If you want to look for the American Pro 2. What's that?
You're calling that a green?
No, this is a blue.
Okay.
In the process, but that's my point. In the process of buying this guitar, I ended up with this is an American version, and there was a Mexican version. There was no color that I really liked, and this color was enough for me to be like, you know what, man? I've been playing guitar long enough. I'm 41. Like, when am I gonna buy a guitar that is like really worthy of the time?
Right now, I'm gonna buy a guitar.
But what's it called? Like, I'll just put it back here for people to be able to appreciate the color. The process of buying it, there were definitely guitar. I had another blue guitar that I was like, this one doesn't feel like it's mine, you know? Like, and the idea of the color being important in the process of, like, because it's the same shape as the other guitar that I had. I had another guitar exactly the same shape, like half the price, right? Because it was made in Mexico instead of made in America. And so the impact that the color had, just being like, even though it was green, it wasn't like, and I never thought I would be like, and it wasn't an ugly green guitar. It was just not, it just didn't feel like my guitar. This feels like my guitar.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's something about also the branding of the color, because it's not just blue, it's Miami blue. And it is a very Miami blue. It's like kind of like that typical, like, it's not pastel. It's a little bit more vibrant than pastel. It's not as muted as a pastel, but
it's like a shiny blue.
Yeah, it's like turquoisey. It's bordering on turquoisey, you know, and it actually kind of matches the Beastie Boys on my T-shirt right now, which I just noticed. But
it's like on your door behind you.
We're totally like, I've never in this room just been like so aware of all the colors that I'm experiencing. but so yeah, that's like that sort of validates what you're talking about, because there's something about how this color of blue makes me feel, and it also, the branding of it being Miami blue. I grew up in Miami, you know, that's where I went to high school. That's kind of one of the places that I think of as home. All of those things, not just the color, but the name of the color, and the fact that the name represented a color that was, you know, like they could have called it something else, but it is accurate. Like, it's not inaccurate to call that Miami blue. That is a very Miami blue, right? Yeah. So for me, like, all of those little things just built, like, put together, became this,
like a Canadian blue or a Michigan blue.
Exactly. Yeah, Michigan blue is completely different in my head, right? Like, that's not a Miami blue. No. But yeah, so for me, this was like, this sort of makes this conversation makes sense for me, because I did it on such an intuitive level, but now like, it's like I'm in color therapy right now, and I'm like, hey, I went through this process with these colors, and this is what I felt. And you're like,
I need a green ball. What does that
mean? I dreamt just pitch blue. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, my color, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of thought and also not a lot of thought goes into the way I approach color and painting. If I say I'm going to make a blue, I will spend a good 30 minutes mixing the perfect blue just for that painting. And
Go ahead. Huh? I was just going to say, how much do you lay out of each blue? But finish what your thought, because I'm like, I never know how much.
I'm a disgusting painter. Like, most people have like a clean palette, and I'm like shoveling up like dry, crusty shit and just like make it, like reactivating it and like making it happen, because I like the blue I used 2 weeks ago, and I'm an oil painter, so it sticks there for a while and stays semi, flexible and wet.
It's like hard on the outside and soft on the inside, right? It's like
on top too, and you're like peeling back stuff, to get to the good stuff. I'm always just like, I mean, my whole studio is just disgusting. And so, and like when most people, like, they show like mixing paint on this smooth surface, that's like crunch, 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 as I like pull the mixture on top of all these like flat, like crusty, dried piles of paint.
It's got matte fleck inside of the paint because it's got like other pieces.
I would love to say it's because I'm frugal, but like that's not why. I'm just lazy, you know? So it's like, yes, like the wax
They're
paper
not
I use
mutually
is
exclusive.
I'm both. I'm frugal and disgusting. But I spend a lot of time, and so when I talked about, you know, not being able to see color or value, I've actually never really been able to see purple very well. I always see it as blue. It's like a semi-colored, like blind part of myself. For when most people look at my work, they talk about how color is so important for someone who's slightly colorblind and has a really hard time seeing value.
So wait, so are you actually colorblind? Is that, or you just, because I think that there's like a legit, I think in the people in the, you know, the philosophical thing of like, or whatever, it's not philosophical, but like the thing that you realize when you're a kid where you're like, hey, everybody sees a different color when they see the same thing, right? Like I definitely have noticed that purple and blue is like one of the ones that time every time I am like, that's there's a disagreement on a color, it's gonna be in that like dividing line between purple and blue.
Green, I think that's blue and green and purple and blue. I feel like blue encompasses so much that it like bleeds itself into the green and the purple area, and depending on who you are. But for me, I mean, something has to be blatantly purple for it to be considered purple to me. It needs to be like very violet, or else it's just blue.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I think that my theory has always been that that's a semantic thing. I think that that's like just people like, it's just a matter of where you, but that's really interesting there, right there, just to think about it. And I think, and when you brought up the green and blue, I think that blue-green is more widely accepted as a terminology, whereas like purple-blue and blue-purple is so like cumbersome.
Orange. People just see, or red-orange. People see red or orange.
Yeah.
It's not like that.
No, but I'm saying like the blue green as like you know, like how when you start to learn the color wheel, you start thinking of like you know, like you start calling that segment that is in between blue and green the blue green segment, right? Like whereas I think that like that is more intuitively like, you know, that's like a blue green I think is a cultural thing, whereas like because from language perspective to say purple blue or blue purple is like a little weird. I think that is maybe where that semantic thing comes, where it's like, well, it's either purple or blue, you know, like you were saying.
What's interesting about this is it also comes up when you're talking about additive versus subtractive theory, which is pigment theory versus light theory. So what you see on your computer, you know, or what you print out is different than what you paint. So your printer works off CMYK, but if you're painting, you're working off RGB, and so it's very different.
I'm trying to remember my textbooks. How is it? So with a CMYK, you put all of them together, and what do you get? You get black, or you get white?
Magenta, yellow, and keys. And so keys is your black. White is just your paper. Okay. Cyan is your blue, yellow is your yellow, magenta is your red. But magenta is a very purple red. Versus if you're working in paint, then you're using like a true red.
And but wait, so what makes one subtractive? Maybe I'm confusing synthesis. Like
Go ahead. Additive theory. So you have subtractive theory and you have additive theory. Basically, when you're looking at like if you watch a theater production and you have the three lights, the overlay, and there's white on the bottom, that's light theory. And then you have subtractive theory is basically just like all of the colors absorbing into one thing. So white basically reflects everything. Black absorbs everything. Okay. And so it's basically natural light versus non-natural light.
As I've said before, the last time the place where I stopped with photography was when I had to start using CMYK and having color profiles on my monitors that matched my printers, and I was just like, this doesn't feel like art.
No, I mean, I teach color theory, and it's, you know, it's not. I don't teach well to digital students because I've never taken photography. Photography. I don't understand all of the digital nature of it. I can tell you, kind of robotically how it works. I understand pigment theory as a painter because that's what I do. So I can tell you how your computer screen works, but I don't really understand it. I mean,
it was so frustrating. But anyway,
I know what the textbook does. Sorry if any of my students watch this.
it's like I didn't want to be this kind of nerd,
No, exactly.
So anyway, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so, for me with color, I approached it from this kind of very overwhelming place of, I don't understand it. I can't make it do what I want it to do. So I started painting in these really kind of limited color schemes where I would say, and I always start my backgrounds with a red, an orange, or a hot pink. Mm-hmm. And then I use the complementary color to paint on top of that. And so if you look at my paintings, you'll see a lot of reds kind of popping through that kind of like it brings like a hotness to the painting. Because
what do the complementary colors do when you put them on top? Are you graying them or are you just making the other one pop or both?
No, so I gesso on my canvas and then I use acrylic paint and I do one base of red paint. I let it dry. And then when I go in with my green, I'm just painting on top of that red and that red is through in places. Yeah.
So it's you're not mixing the green and the red.
No, because that would make brown. You would just if you mix complementary colors, you just get brown.
To varying degrees, right? If you have like a lot of red and you put just a touch of green, then you get it dulled down. So then you have like that atmospheric distance thing.
Yeah,
I know some painting lady.
Yeah. And those are actually called your chromatic grays. If you mix a gray complementary colors versus using a black and white. And I'll tell you, I never use black. I don't even know if I own a tube of black paint.
That's how I was taught too. Yeah. Because that would be a tint, right?
It down. It just muddies everything up. And there's so many color relationships. But for me, I have found that it doesn't really matter what I paint. I mean, I'm painting a landscape scene always. It's always going to be trees and usually some water. I typically have, a pretty median horizon line, and there's always a sun or a moon there. The color speaks to the scene more than the scene itself. And I found that color is like the strongest force of my paintings because I'm painting about memory, nostalgia, belonging, home. I'm very sentimental, which a lot of, contemporary painters, they're just like, when it comes to sentimental, because that's just not what's in right now. And it's probably why I have like a stack this high of rejection letters. But I just, that's who I am as a painter. And I can't, I have found that when I push to be even more sentimental, that's when the work is actually very successful. If I'm toning myself down to try and fit some sort of a trend or something, the work feels fake. It feels fraud. You can smell it from a mile away. So
yeah, you're actually the first person. I've been doing this show for like 100 episodes, and you're the first person that talks about how that's the first time that sentiment has been expressed, and I relate to that greatly. Like the idea of like when you're fraudulent, like when you know that it's. I don't know, like that was nice. That was interesting because I mean, not that people don't think about it. It's just the first time that it's come up, and it's a really interesting thought. Expand on it.
I mean, landscape painting it's a tough place to be as an artist because, historically it just has this huge, this huge reputation as being a certain thing, and many people see it as, very one-dimensional, as, there's not a lot of places to go with it. And the places it has gone have already gone. You've got Charles Birchfield, you've got Peter Doig, so, and for me as a female painter.
How do they represent stuff? Sorry.
Oh, they branched away from landscape painting being something that just documented, historically painters documented things as a way to document them. So then the camera comes along and artists come in and it frees artists to represent their natural world however they want. that natural world has been represented abstractly. It's been surrealist. It's been sublime. It's been all of these things. And so landscape painters now have a real obstacle to create paintings that haven't already been made before. Mm-hmm. But especially, this drives me nuts. I get compared to Peter Doig all the time. And I love his work. Who doesn't? I mean, everyone loves Peter Doig's work, but
everyone
it's like
that knows who he is.
Who he is?
No.
I love it. I mean, almost every review is like, oh, it's reminiscent of Doig's work. He's still alive. I'm like, it's not reminiscent. He's still painting.
Don't worry. That's their point of reference.
But it's like a girl can't paint a canoe around here without getting Peter Doig. I'm like, men have been doing it forever. You come in and you're like, pine trees are like, it's Doig. I'm like, no.
She's painting so phallic. No, I don't know if that's his thing, but
none of my work is phallic though at all.
I know. I've seen your work. I'm just making a joke, I'm just taking it to the full extent of the patriarchal attitude there.
But this is a conversation I'll have with my dad. I'm like, I'm just so tired of you calling Doig, and he's like, what is she talking about?
Doig
people don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I mean, no offense to his work, love his work, but it's landscape painters. I just feel like, there are these staples, there's these pillars and they're typically male who have, historically in art, men have been, the forefront of all of the pillars of art. And so you come in as a painter and you're trying to, for me, I basically just said, I don't care if it looks like Doig. Maybe we're painting from the same place, because we're in this whole new era of art where school of thought no longer holds any value. Up until really I'd say the 50s and 60s, you did subscribe to a school of thought. You were a modernist, you were a constructionist, you were all these things. And you were supposed to be working together in this collective thought. And now it's like we've all gone rogue. And you can't, if you kind of walk this line of you need to kind of nod to your contemporaries without actually being like them, because then you're derivative. And I live, out in the middle of the woods in Indiana. So I just paint what I paint. And if it gets called Doig, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I will say,
no,
I feel like I've honed in. I feel like when it comes to the color aspect of my work, I find if I think about something too long, it's bad. And so I just go into the studio and I think I'm going to make this night painting. It's going to be blue. And it is completely intuitive from start to finish. I typically finish a painting in one sitting. Almost all my paintings, unless they're big, are done in a sitting.
Okay, that is something I really appreciate, and especially because I don't relate to it, because you just said the longer I think of something, the worse it is. And I love that. I have no idea what you're talking about, but no, I do. I totally do. But that is maybe where like I could learn something, or you get what I'm saying. Like there's something, there's a balance there, but like that triggered an excitement in me just to hear that, like, is like, because I was like, that is like the most counterintuitive thing I've heard.
You think it is.
No, but just for my practice, that this is a personal reaction. That I'm not the authority on that.
Play it like for imposter syndrome, which is like so real for anyone in any art field. You've got this imposter syndrome. So if you go in and you're not thinking, then is it really you making it? Like, can you have that, that revulsion to your own work? Because I mean, many times I look at paint, I'm like, you have like that full body feeling of like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I paint too, when you look at something, do you ever blur your eyes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how a lot of people can't do that. They don't know how to completely blur their eyes while doing anything or reading.
I was really good at those magic eye posters from the 90s that you obviously were into, because you're from.
Oh, it trains you well. So I actually automatically paint blurred eyed. I do it on purpose, and it's like, so I'm just.
Well, isn't that kind of how you're supposed to? Sorry, you said something and I didn't hear it.
Oh, I was saying I'm just as surprised as anyone else when I finally zoom into it. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Isn't that how you're supposed to paint though? Like, isn't
No one
that like,
told me that. I don't know. I have no idea.
I think that like, I don't know. Okay, I'm literally looking at a painting right now. I'm not gonna pull it off the wall and hold it because it's like drilled in.
Yeah.
No, it's not like my guitar that's on a hook. But there's a painting that I have that I used to think was unfinished, and it is still it's clearly unfinished. But it's workable because what I was taught was to like paint it like it's a Polaroid picture developing instead of like a printer printing out something, right? So that to me that totally makes sense, and it seems incredibly intuitive, right? Especially like this is in particular, it's a a plein air painting. excuse me, of my view from my apartment in Florence.
Right? My view from my apartment in Florida.
Yeah, but anyway, pretension aside, like I mean, there really was a point where I was thinking about painting as like being the thing, and I kind of had a knack for it, but for me it just wasn't the thing that I wanted to like spend time, because I knew how much time it would take, right? Like, and I already know how to draw, so I can sort of express those things with those tools. But there is the, even as somebody who draws, like especially if I'm drawing linear without pencils, right? Or like when it's just ink on paper, it's a completely different process. It's almost impossible. You can lay out your drawing and then fill it up, but the tonality and the value side, which you say you're not that good at, but
I can't draw. Like,
no, I totally understand that. But I'm saying like, that's I mean, that is essentially is my point. Like, right? Like it's a completely different approach. So I can see how you would say that people can't blur their eyes, but you know, like for the difference between that and what I'm comfortable, like for me, what was frustrating about painting was the inability to like, or at least at that point, at early on, to make the same kind of mark that I would make with a pen, which I have a lot of control with a pen, or with a, you know, or like with a, you know, whatever ink medium that tool that you have, like a quill or something like that, right? Whereas with a brush, the brush gives, the canvas gives. There's a lot of elements that are kind of, from a tactile sense, you have to make a leap, and then but then going back to the topic, you add the fucking color. And you said earlier you spent 30 minutes.
Because I'm using, I mean, if you look at my paintings, it's like, it's blue there. And then there's very subtle, like, you know, there's certain things to understand about color. Every color has a warm and a cool, even your cool color. So there's a warm blue, there's a cool blue.
Yes.
And so if I'm trying to depict a wintry night, and you'll see my scenes are very reductive. The reason why I say like a poet painter is because I've always imagined when a poet goes to write a poem, they're telling themselves to say less. They probably write something really extensive, and then they're constantly trimming it down just to the very basis, the very essence of what's needed to tell whatever story or give whatever feeling. But, you know, these poets, I mean, they say so much in just very few words. So as a painter, I try to do that same thing. I try to, you know, talk about a starry night, or, you know, give the romance of a river or a mountain, and do it just so simply, just so reductive. And through color, you know, you have to be very specific about that. What blue is going to actually give this feeling of this cool night? You know, what purpley sky is going to be the perfect purple to do the entire sky to talk about magic hour. Only one purple is that purple. You know, I could sit here and gradiate the entire sky and then give you all the light of the leaves, and you're going to go, oh, that's magic hour. But how can I do one red on the trees and one purple on the sky and say all of that just with these two colors? And so I think that, you know, color is so powerful in that way, because for me, I don't want to over explain something. I just want to give it the essence of what that feeling was.
What's interesting, you made me think of something that I like from school. I don't know if you've ever read. I think it's the foreword was written for the Americans, the Robert Frank photography book. Okay, so Robert Frank is a Swiss immigrant during the whatever, like he was in the 50s, whatever, when America wasn't that great, you know. This is all like very vague shit that I remember from college, but I mean, obviously he's either Swiss or Swedish, I can't remember. But people are cringing right now, and I'm just so leaning in and trolling them. But okay, so the educated point that they will appreciate is that so in the Americans, the foreword is written by Robert Frank, or not by Jack Kerouac. And Jack Kerouac is talking about the book and one of the things that he describes is how all right, it comes up a lot on the show. Photography is not a narrative form, right? Because it doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. So it seems like with parameters, and Clement Greenberg would be very upset with you for doing this, but with very specific parameters, you're sort of approaching what he talks about in the foreword, which is that photography is it hints at narrative and it's lyrical, but it's not narrative. And so he likens it to poetry. When you keep mentioning, you keep making that. So I'm actually going to encourage you to read it. I'll see if I can find it for you and forward it to you because it's actually really interesting and it's written by a very important. It's like very important writer that I have my thoughts on. I do agree with what's his name, the true crime writer, He that's not typing it, or no, that's not writing, it's typing. What's the fucking guy that whatever. Tangent dead.
I can't help you here. I'm terrible with names.
But you know who I'm talking about, right? The guy who wrote In Cold Blood or some shit like that is a true crime writer. There's movies about him. Anyway, he was a Southern guy. The point being that like photography is lyrical, and it sounds like you're narrowing down through decision-making process, right? And through your own interests to parameters that essentially make you work in this space where you are suggesting at narrative without actually being directly explicit about it. And that can be, I mean, if photography is powerful for that reason, that also can be a very useful tool, you know, like if you're talking about the psychological impact of something like that, right? So that's really interesting. I still don't remember the guy's name, but go ahead.
And I'm always, the scenes that I choose are always, they're very idealistic. Mm-hmm. Most of the scenes that I paint now have no reference photo. They are, I take a ton of photos and, so growing up, I didn't have the childhood home, but I did have this one place I went to every summer, Lake Almanor in California. We went there since I was 2 probably. And now as an adult, we still go every other year. So it's Northern California. It's around Lake Tahoe, Reno area.
And that's where my lakes in California.
Yeah, right.
I'm in LA. I'm in Southern California. I was like, lakes. That's like
this is California. You got to go north. So anyway, when I first started painting, so my undergraduate or my graduate program, when I, for my thesis, I painted all interior spaces. I painted every bed I'd ever slept in. So my entire thesis was every bed I'd ever slept in, every childhood home. I wrote the whole thing on the idea of the childhood home. I read the Gaston Bachelard, Poetics of Space. And, it just changed the way that I viewed home and, how it affects, especially because I was entering into motherhood. I was pregnant my senior year of my graduate program. And so I was entering into becoming a mother. And, I'm hesitant to say, I love both my parents. We have a great relationship. They are divorced. They divorced as when I was an adult. But I don't have that magical childhood. I'm not sure anyone does, but
mine was pretty magical, not to be contrarian, but no, I'm kidding.
My husband did. He's like, he can point to the house that every milestone he ever experienced happened in that backyard, and it's like, he has, yeah. So, and you're just
I'm jealous of that too. I have a little bit more like you, but like, I could never say, like, I lived in Rome, so.
Exactly. You lived in Rome, so.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I can't relate to that jealousy.
Yeah. But I just think that, I've got high standards. I think from a very young child, I was a huge romantic, and I was such an avid reader. And it's like, the reason why I don't know all the movies and all that is because I was a kid with my nose in books. And I was reading.
But that's what's fascinating about where you're from, because you brought up the term simulacra, but like that's literally where some of those cities are, right? There's Nashville is also a very important town in terms of music and in terms of like just instrument sales and all of that. Like it you can't deny. That is like where a lot of session musicians still live. So like it is a hub of musicians that make a living from their talent. So there are these like performer elements in all these places, right? So it's interesting. But I think that like there is its own, it's almost like it's own American experience. Like, I can see where the romance comes from in your work, right? Like it's not it's not like, what's it called, Norman Rockwell, but it's almost like contemporary capitalist.
But honestly, it's like I'm more inspired by when you go to a national park and they give you the tour maps that basically they take every element of what you're going to see in that park and they put it on this tiny map. They've got the moose and the bear and, they've got the half dome and they've got, they've got everything.
Look like a Disney map. Like
here. Yes, it's a Disney map. And I feel like I try to take all of that, look how exciting, you might see all these things. And I put it in a painting. And it's look, it's the sun and the stars and the rainbow. And also there's some mountains, there's a river and it's so serene. And, it's all jam pack all of the nostalgia into one little painting.
Yeah, but I think that you're making it sound more kitsch than it is.
No,
it's romantic. It's not making it.
But that's what I'm inspired by is like.
No. I just want to clarify for people that haven't seen the work that are listening to this.
They're not going to go to my website and be like, "Where's the glitter? Where's the gold?"
No. Well, that's also because I talk to people that do that, and that stuff is equally as interesting. But I do think this. Essentially, all these conversations about painting that are contemporary, they are very much about decisions that are personal, right? Yes. And so I want people to understand what we're talking about, that even though we're making these kitschy references, it's more like, I would say it's more like the experience of the actual simulacra, where it's unsettling and weird rather than cartoonish on a map. Right. And that's
I get that a lot from people. They'll say it's beautiful, but it's also ominous. There's something really lonely about the work.
And having grown up in places like Reno and Vegas, I can totally I did the Let's Do Acid in Vegas, and it was dark. It was not Hunter S. Thompson's Vegas. It was
not Hunter S. Thompson's Vegas.
Then again, I also did Special K there, and it was a lot of fun.
I went to my first prom I did in Vegas because I lived in Vegas twice. I lived there for kindergarten and first grade.
Your first prom?
Right.
So tell me how that was. It registered late, but go ahead.
LSD in kindergarten. I'm just kidding.
No. How was prom? So there was like,
Well, actually, it was so funny because, like my husband's prom is very small town. It's like they ate at like, what's that, Red Corral or whatever?
Golden Corral?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I've never been there. He has. They eat somewhere like that, then they, buy off the rack and they go to prom. I went to Blue Man Group and ate at some steakhouse in Bellagio and then went to my prom. And that was like a norm. That's what kids did. They went to a show.
We stayed at the Fontainebleau in Miami. So same shit. It's regional. Like, what's the thing, bro?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, go back to what your experience. But
my educational background, it's like I went from private to public to Christian school to public to private. And it was like my parents just couldn't make up their mind. It was like depending on what city we lived in, they were like, we'll give public a try. They sent me to public in Vegas. I think they gave me 9 weeks and they ripped me out and sent me to a Lutheran school. They were like, nope.
Yeah. In my imagination, I'm picturing two mob bosses from Kansas City going, hey, I'm trying to remember Joe Pesci's accent in Casino. Is like, hey, what's up with her? How are we going to fix this?
I know. Well, the funny thing is I had met this really nice guy. And it was Sadie Hawkins. Do you have that? Where the girl asked the guy.
Explain it again. Sorry, in case I stepped over you.
Sadie Hawkins is just where the girl asked the guy. So it's backwards. It's like that was back when like social norms were like still like this is not going to offend anyone, so we're going to have this happen. So they had Sadie Hawkins, where it's like it was a big deal because the guys asked the girls. Now it's a norm. Now girls can ask guys, and it's not like, oh, the girl asked the guy. But like when I was in high school, they had to have a whole dance separate for it so that women could approach men.
Can I push back on that? Because I was a very shy boy, and if I was still that shy boy, I know it doesn't present that way anymore, but in high school, I was a very shy boy, and if I had been a girl and I could have lived off of that norm, that was literally the only way I had any romantic entanglements is like aggressive girls. So
I need aggressive girls. No, I was all up. But even back then, I think I felt like this is weird that we have an entire separate dance where girls ask guys, because anytime I went to a dance, it was like it was a conversation, I never got like proposed to, it was like you had a conversation about it. You both consented to doing this thing and you went. So
proposed is a new term, isn't it? That didn't exist when you were younger.
No, but Modern Family just I've had a lot of late nights, so I'm watching Modern Family.
No, I recognize propose. I like that registers as a post-internet,
But it wasn't when I was in school. But I'm hip. I'm a hip mom.
All of our generation needs to just like band together, kind of like Wall Street Bets, and just troll the whole internet with like I was gonna say BRB, but that's actually stood the test of time.
Yeah, G2G has not.
What's G2G? Got to go?
It's not.
That is the hashtag right there. You nailed it. G2G. And it was right there. Wow. That was like, God, that was good. That was really good. All right.
So
Do we have anything sorry, go ahead.
So Sadie Hawkins. So my parents sent me, so I came from New Orleans to Las Vegas.
Okay.
And are you familiar with a country day school?
No.
They're like Pleasantville's. They're like Vanderbilt campuses, and you eat at like tables with linens. And
so it's more simulacra.
There's no religious affiliation to it. It's just a very like fancy private school. So when we moved to New Orleans, my dad was like, if we're going to take this job, New Orleans was in a like not a great place at that time. And so he didn't want to send to public school where we would have to live. So he said, want to send to private school. So his business paid for us to go to a private school. So we went to the school.
So this was during Katrina, or no? You're too old for that.
Right before Katrina.
Okay.
Actually. Okay. I think Katrina happened.
Wait. New Orleans was fucked up before Katrina? Holy shit!
I know. Yeah, New Orleans was awesome. I still love the city.
No, but you know what I mean. Like, it was not socially just.
Yeah. So my parents moved me to Vegas from there.
Wow.
So I go, and they're like, we're going to put you in public school now because it's all good. And so I get into public school, and it's like, it is just like culture shock for me to go, because the public school I went to was called Bonanza. It was, I want to say there was like 500 people in my class. I was coming from like a 70-person class to a 500, and I was going into my freshman year of high school. So it was like, so it was a huge transition. So, I meet some friends, and I met this guy, and I asked him Sadie Hawkins, and I call my sister at college, and I'm like, he has a baby. What is wrong with that? So my sister's like, oh, shit.
Oh, girl, he's not mature.
Oh my gosh, I know. And I was like so innocent. My sister's like, do you know how he got that baby? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
He's going to get you pregnant.
So she called my parents. My parents were like, what? So my dad, he's like, is there anything I should know about this boy? And I'm like, he's really nice. And he's like, I'm like, he's a cheerleader. He's like, anything else? I'm like, can't think of anything.
Wait, hold on.
He was a cheerleader.
This is post George W. Bush, right?
This was
this was during George W. Bush.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah,
the president cheerleader that we had.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no one cared that he was a cheerleader. I was a cheerleader, so no one cared. That was fine.
Yeah, no, but there's a sociopathic thing to guys that are cheerleaders.
Agree. Actually, like
I was actually I was about to get ready to get canceled, but I'm glad that we're both going to get canceled. Any male cheerleader that is not gay is a fucking creep.
Great male cheerleaders, yes. So, you guys, your own subject. So anyway, that was a Thursday when my dad found out. I was in a Lutheran private school by a Monday. And then I met his cousin, and I dated him instead.
Was he pregnant? Did he get anyone pregnant?
No, he was a really nice guy. He's still a really nice guy.
Oh, cool. Good job, cousin.
Yeah.
I love that the person that in this
group with.
Wait, sorry, say that again?
That's who I went to prom with. That's who I went and saw Blue Man Group with.
The cousin or the guy that
the cousin. I got pulled from the public straight to the private.
I'm glad that it ended that way, because I was about to say, like, somehow the good guy ended up in the context of the bad guy. Like, he was the cousin of the asshole, and I'm like, let's give him some credit, man. Yeah. He saw the Blue Man Group. That must have been cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's hilarious.
Yeah, well, honestly, I feel like I took all that for granted, because with my dad being in casinos, Cirque du Soleil, all of like the Bellagio shows. That was something if we went to see Dad, that's what we went to go do, was to go see the shows. Yeah. And the same thing in Nashville. When we moved to Nashville, he took over the Opryland Hotel, which was over the Ryman and the Wild Horse Saloon. So, I was 16, 17, 18 backstage at the Ryman, seeing some of the biggest shows that the Ryman has had and that the Grand Ole Opry has had, just because I was there with my dad. So I feel like I grew up and then was like, man, why did I take my Harry Potter book to that? Like, I definitely should have been listening. But at the time, you couldn't have convinced me to put down Harry Potter. So I didn't.
Okay, I'm sorry, but that is so like, that's beautiful. You're like the angsty teenager rebelling against your parents' like bullshit world.
Harry Potter backstage at the Ryman. Yeah, it was.
We can get into a conversation about how that book is neoliberal like propaganda.
Oh yeah, it is. It really is.
But okay, so going back to my my bougie childhood, I did go to a British school when I was in Italy. I went to St. George's English School in Rome. We were all children of diplomats. We all had British accents. My mom was a Cuban.
Where's yours?
Huh?
Where's yours?
I moved to Miami, so I tried to get rid of it as fast as possible. I was like, this is not popular here. No one's ever going to fuck me.
That's so like anti, because you would think it would definitely work for you.
Yeah, I just moved to the worst place to have a British accent. I did not say bro enough. And now I say it an adequate enough time, but I don't have a British accent, so I don't get it's like a perpetual striking out. But no, I mean, no, I get laid plenty, girls. No, I'm kidding.
Girls,
just don't worry about me. Like I'm talking to. I suddenly became an old woman. All right, so bougie school. What was I gonna say? Oh, so yeah. So the school. We had prefix. We had four schools. It was Byron, Livingston, Drake, and Newton. Newton would be the Hufflepuff.
The Hufflepuff are the worst.
Yeah, they were the nerds, and then like literally it's kind of like neoliberal bullshit, because it's like they put all the nerds together, marginalize them. Their house always loses its sports, and then Byron, Drake, and Livingston kind of flesh it out for a while. And so go back to our topic, color. What color would you think Newton is?
Which one is Newton?
It's the Hufflepuff.
They're the yellow.
Nice. So it holds up. So it may just be a British cultural thing, because it was a British school. And okay, so then Livingston was green, Byron was red, and Drake was blue. And so Byron was really the most athletic, the red one, and then Livingston was sort of like on the creative tip. Drake was athletic and creative. I started off in Livingston because my brother in the green Livingston, because my brother was Livingston. But then once my brother graduated, they switched me and all my friends to Drake. And like, dude, this was like life politics. And these are the people that, you know, like you ended up talking to all the fucking time. So, so we used to have cross country. We used to have like intramural competitions. It was a fucking big school. And so,
was this an all boys school?
No. This was, dude. You want to know how much I don't relate to you being like, no one had a ideal childhood. My childhood was better than my adulthood by like a long shot.
I want to go back.
Yeah, I've said this before on the show. I used to fantasize about my school being a boarding school.
Oh, that's lovely.
But anyway, so yeah.
You do not relate to Harry Potter living in a closet.
No, I related to it a whole. That's my point. I grew up in this whole it was it was like my dad worked for the UN, so it was like I knew people whose parents worked for EFAD. I knew people whose parents worked for WHO, which is the World Health Organization. Like those were my friends, and then it was like mostly them, and then like all the Italian kids whose parents wanted them to learn how to speak English and be international. And then that campus was huge. It had an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It was in Via Cassia. And then I left the school, and it was like massive. It had this fucking it was amazing. I could go on. It had like several soccer fields. It had, it was like a fucking Roman Colosseum, or like the way that you would imagine. No, no murder. The way that you imagine Roman sports in an amphitheater, it was like that. Like they had it was
all shirtless. It's all shirtless, right?
Yeah, I mean we were nude. We were like little boys just hanging out with our dicks out.
gosh.
No. I mean, this was when I was a kid, so what else would it be? So then I met my friend up a while later, and it turns out that there was this huge fucking scandal, and the school got split in half. They had to sell half of it because the place where I went to school that was all new, like for the young kids, they had the old part and then the new part that they just built. They were running some like Italian mafia scam where they were buying duplicate parts of everything so that they could write it off, and like the whole school collapsed. It was like the most neoliberal bullshit. The fantasy ended up in reality, and so yeah. But sorry for that long rant.
No, I love that you use the word bougie, because like I unapologetically use it too, because you get to a point where it's like, I don't want to come across as like a spoiled person. So like, or like, like flaunt my privilege, but there is, you should acknowledge the fact if you come from from a background like that. And for me, I come from a very privileged background. The way I live now, like my husband was an elementary school teacher when I met him and we married. And now he works with farmers and I'm an artist. So, we're obviously not like rolling in the dough. But, I was raised in a very affluent lifestyle because my dad was in casinos and hotels. My mom didn't work. And, they still live those lifestyles. But when I talk about my childhood, it's like, someone said to me recently, it was something to do with like cleaning or implementing chores or something. And I was like, I was raised with maids. No. Like, I don't know. Took me a while to figure out, like, I feel like I came in at like, it was hard for me to become like a mother who had to clean up after everybody. Cause I was like, holy shit, like this is a full-time job. And you're like, it was a full-time job. Yeah. It is a full-time job to keep a house, to take care of everything.
Yeah. But to be fair to you and to my parents, cause like, and this is an interesting thing about just general economics, because I think that the kind of impulse right now is to just sort of shame anybody that had any good luck growing up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're not born into it, right? The thing that can be learned about both of the facts that we had privileged livelihoods, lifestyles, and we ended up not being as well off as our parents, right? Like, and the whole thing for immigrants in my parents' case is that they wanted a better life for their children. Not accounting for my siblings who are doing much better than me. But there's something to be said about the fact that there is no, like, I don't know about how long casinos have been around in a legitimate sense, but like the idea of like generational wealth, like, like, there are some people that love to be like, especially to me, like, it's like, yeah, but you're not that white. And I'm like, yeah, I understand that. I am like racially white, but my parents are Cuban immigrants. The country that I live in has had an embargo on my family's country. I don't know, there's like a disruption there, but like economically, which is the dialogue that I think is helpful, is like, there is generational wealth that even as white people, you and I do not have access to on the same level. So we did grow up in privilege, and it serves to acknowledge that. But there is sort of this thing that is interesting to sort of consider, where it's like labor is slowly getting less and less valued. Definitely. And power is more and more concentrated. And so who survives that? Definitely not you and I. Right? Yeah. And so that is a caution, like that is an interesting sort of like thing to include in the whole conversation about privilege, because it is like my parents worked their asses off and they had education. And when it came time for me to go to school, they're like, yeah, an education will solve everything. My siblings, though they're doing better than me, they are in insane amounts of debt. I am not doing as well as them because I did not get into that much debt. Right. Yeah. And so there's something to be said about that. Right. And yeah.
It's funny that you bring up generational wealth, because monetarily, no. But I will say that if I was not raised in the family I was, with the privileges that were afforded to me, for me, college was not a question of if I'll go, it's where I'll go. And then it was paid for. Now, my graduate school, my dad said, I will pay for your undergraduate. I won't pay for graduate. And I ended up getting tuition scholarships and a stipend that covered everything. I came out of graduate school having made money. I didn't have to do anything, which was great. I don't know that I could have done it any other way. But I'll also say I never would have gone into the arts had I been raised in a family that told me you have to make money. Money is the main thing.
100%.
My dad pushed, be happy, find your passion, which I think there is, there's greatness in that. I think that I will probably tone it back a little bit for my kids, because if I could go back and redo things, I would have added something, extra to my degree. I have been extremely, and I don't want to, discount my hard work or, how strong my work is, but I have been very lucky to find the galleries. I mean, I live in a log cabin on 11 acres in the middle of nowhere. The town I live in is less than 1,000 people. To be a contemporary artist that has any sort of reputation in this kind of a setting is pretty unheard of. And so typically, you need to live in New York, you live in LA or Chicago or, London, somewhere where you have access to big galleries. For me, the galleries I work with, I'm represented from a gallery in Nashville and Milwaukee and in Denver. Cities that, Nashville and Denver, I have ties to, but they didn't happen because of those ties. It's just the way, the cards fell. But I do feel very lucky that I'm actually thriving in this, because I know that the majority of people I went to school with are not thriving as artists. They're having to find secondary employment. I do adjunct, but I make more from my painting sales than I do from adjuncting. I adjunct because I truly enjoy teaching, and I would love to get into teaching actual studio classes.
Yeah.
All that to say that while I didn't, inherit, great wealth as, or a business or anything like that, I don't think this is the route I would have taken if I wasn't raised the way I was.
100%. Yeah.
There just would have been more push towards find an actual career.
But that goes back to sort of the talk about how, like, our parents didn't know the world that we were going to be living in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the world according to how they grew up, they knew artists that had, like, my parents were like, holy shit, this guy, you'll be fine. You just get an art degree, you'll have 3 months off. It's amazing. Yeah, and you can just work all the fucking time. So it is. It's like you're 100%. Like, I think that our parents' generation maybe had that, like, success, and they were like, oh, we've made it. And it's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
All your kids are going to have to pay twice as much as you did to get anywhere near having the kids that they do, right?
The distribution of wealth among generations. It's like 2 to 6%. It's a pretty big variable, but it's like boomers hold everything. And then, like,
100%.
after, we got nothing.
Yeah, so it was like, I don't know. It's a really interesting conversation, and I appreciate you acknowledging the good fortune you've had, but why aren't there more opportunities to make more money when you go to school? That's a unique thing that happens in the U.S. There's a lot of bland art coming out of Austria. I've seen it. They show it here in LA. I've met the artists. They're dicks.
Honestly, I will tell you, like, art school is great for generating a community, for, giving you a place to have really good, conversation. But I still don't think you can teach good art. And if you are teaching good art, you're teaching derivative art. Art school, while I think that it's valuable, I don't think that it makes or breaks whether or not someone is a good artist. Now, there's galleries that, really do look like, do you have a pedigree? Did you go to RISD? Did you go to SAIC? Did you go to these big schools that, immediately when you graduate, you have a label of, I'm a good artist because I went to the school. I think that honestly, social media has been the biggest place where it has basically taken down all those gatekeepers. It doesn't matter if a gallery head or a museum head says you're good anymore, because if you blow up on Instagram and have enough followers and people who say, I love this work, who are you going to listen to, the audience or the person who runs the facility? And so, I think we're in a whole new area of art, which is, for me, social media, that's been the big thing, is that's been the only platform I've had to put my work out, because I don't live near a city.
And going back to you acknowledging your good fortune, like, you were probably somewhat of an early adopter to be in the position that you are, to be making, like, you said you didn't want to discount your work. I want to acknowledge it, right? Like, because that, I mean, as someone who is actively promoting a podcast regularly, like, it is, it's not an easy thing to it's not an easy thing to navigate. You can't go to your parents who gave you your good opportunities and ask them for feedback on this. You have to work with your peers. You have to stay active. So that shit takes a lot of work. But anyway, I'm really enjoying this conversation. I don't want to keep keep going back and forth on generational wealth and all of that, because I don't feel like that was like the main source of what we were talking about.
Yeah, generational wealth.
Yeah, no. Like, I think that we just kind of hit a acknowledging our privilege spiral, because we were just talking about how fucking privileged we are. But like, and there's guilt involved in that. But I do think that like, I don't think that working in casinos should be any less stigmatized than like being Hunter Biden, so yeah, you've been privileged, but your parents worked hard in an industry that was probably very fucking competitive with very high.
Came from nothing. My dad moved out to Vegas from Michigan with $200 in his pocket and put himself through University of Nevada, Reno in a finance degree, working as a blackjack dealer at Harris. And then 20 years later, he was the CEO of Harris. And so he wasn't born, he's one of 5 kids. His dad made $12,000 a year. He really did. I mean, and he did it with a wife and a 2-year-old that he adopted.
And so, look at you now. Social media self-starter. So like, you know what I'm saying? Like, like, you didn't inherit your social media shit. Like, so I know there's like a pressure to sort of acknowledge things, but like, yeah, you fucking, no, it's an important, there's so much conversation centered about race in this country. Like, you inherited, you had nannies. Okay. And they helped you with your arts and crafts. So your art education, your painting education started earlier than you acknowledged. No, but I think it's healthy to have a sincere conversation. I think it would be hokey for us to be like, every fucking phrase we said was like, yeah, but I would never know what it's like to be a black woman. Like, I would never know what it's like to be like, that's so performative. Like, we are 2 people having a public conversation about our experiences, and there's stuff to be learned from that, right? And it's not invalid just because it's not as marginalized as other experiences, and there's not and there's nothing, and it's not less constructive in the broader economic discussion to acknowledge that, like, our parents did well for themselves. My parents were Cuban refugees. They did have privileges compared to Mexican refugees or anybody else from the Latin American descent. However, our families have been decimated, right? And so, yeah, the reality is that my siblings were able to get help to go to school. I've gotten help from my parents, like, into adulthood. Like, legit, you know? I would not be able to do this fucking podcast if I had not had all those privileges growing up and you know, like during COVID and all of that, right? Like, I have a support system. I didn't fucking when I didn't have unemployment insurance that I paid into, I didn't eat a complete fucking dick because I had family that taught me how to invest and all of that. Like, there's all of those little things, and yes, they deserve to be acknowledged. But ultimately, there is a cutoff point. We grew up in what was used to be considered the middle class.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't exist anymore, and it's important to talk about that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a very valid conversation, and I think that your experiences are very valid, and I really appreciate. Like, I feel like we had such a wild time early on in this conversation. We were all giggly. We ended up in this really serious place where we wanted to talk about this stuff, but it's been very intimate and very fruitful, and I really appreciate you. You know, like sharing all of this stuff, we are of a very particular generation.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I was actually listening to one of your other podcasts where you were talking about, I think you were talking to Kale and asking about millennials. Mm-hmm. And I always feel like, because I actually don't know where I land in it.
What year were you born? I'll tell you.
Yes.
What's that?
86.
So you're a millennial.
But I don't feel like that's fair, because I feel like there needs to be like
Exennial
split, because I was, as a teenager, cell phones weren't a thing. And, you know, I got a Nokia when I was 16, but like my parents kept it in a drawer. And it was like, I got to take it when I went to friends' houses. And it wasn't, I mean, even graduating, I think my mom gave me her razor. Like the razor had just come out, and she she gave me her old one, and she got the new one.
Yeah.
I mean, like up until 16, there needs to be a pre-cell phone and a post-cell phone millennial, because it is very unfair that it's all just smashed together.
That's something that we've talked about since like almost like the third, fourth episode of this podcast. So there is a generation there is there's like a bracket that they've created called Exennial, which tries to compensate for that. And I used to buy into that, but ultimately I thought about the long arc of history. Sorry, you have to say it like that when you say that.
Just like that.
I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, man, there's people that have been through crazy changes before, you know, like and like crazy like plagues and shit like that, which we just went through, and like
plague and a post-plague.
Exactly. Like, the generations that were just born before the plague, like, fuck them, you know?
It's the plague.
You were born in 2020, fuck you. Yeah, your parents had that economic suffering, right? Like
COVID and post-COVID.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think that's a valid thing to contemplate. But I pose this to you. Our parents lived before plastic existed.
What?
Yeah.
No.
100%.
When was plastic?
Think about the lunch boxes. I think it was 40 in the 40s, like plastic. Here, let's.
59. How old are your parents?
My parents are in their, I don't even know, because I don't count every year, you know, and on purpose, because I don't want them to die. When was plastic invented?
Our parents were both born in 1959, and I know that.
But listen, so basically, if petrol, you know, like was like petroleum and all those wars weren't really fought, and like the Shah being put in place in Iran and all of that, it didn't really happen until the 50s, right after World War II. So plastic, like World War II, I would say plastic is definitely after that. If your parents were definitely not born before that. Mine were 100% born. Wait, let me do a quick search. When
acrylic paint was in the 50s, and acrylic is plastic.
Okay, 1907, but I'm talking about like...
Like Yes, like I know what you mean though, like
petroleum-based plastic. Like I'm talking, like our parents. Hold on. Mass-produced plastic. Okay. Well, okay.
Well, you look at modern art, 50s and 60s, and it's all plastic. It's Andy Warhol, it's silk screening, it's it's acrylic paint.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about my parents' childhood.
Gotcha.
So maybe in the U.S., because of the war, there was no plastics. And maybe in some obscure part of the world, there was some fucking asshole was like, I'm going to mass produce plastics. And then we bombed the shit out of them. And they were like, there was no plastic. But okay, Bauhaus was very much about using plastics. Those materials were somewhat... okay, according to what I just saw in 1907, which was like when my grandfather wasn't born until 1913. But dude, we've been going for so long. We gotta wrap this up. We can get into a debate about, but according to my,
tell me about him.
According to my mom, let's just end here. According to my mom, she did not have an experience of plastics when she was younger, and if you think about it. There weren't plastic lunchboxes until like 80s and 90s. There were plenty of metal lunchboxes. So even though plastic may have been mass produced, it wasn't necessarily a consumer product.
Produced, yeah. Until it made it to a lunchbox, it doesn't count.
Yeah, 100%. Because think about all the little fucking kitsch figurines that we have now.
And the Happy Meals, yeah.
Look, I am the authority on everything. And we should end there.
Well, listen, I have two like coffin-sized bins of Beanie Babies in my basement. So
you need to listen to the episode with what's her name? Oh my God, my boss is calling me. So this is just we got to wrap it up right now.
Okay.
Anyway, I just got so distracted. You should listen to the episode called When Stuffed Animals Attack. It is about okay. That woman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that woman blew my mind. But you should definitely check that out. And then, what can you promote for us? Danielle Winger at Danielle Winger on. At
Danielle Winger art is just underscore art.
Yeah, and by the way, just to show people how bad I am at names, I asked you before the episode, and it wasn't just because Danielle was a name. It was because I used to read your name as Danielle Wellinger. Because I'm super dyslexic, and when
my maiden name is Sevigny.
I don't know.
It's Sevigny, but it reads like Savigny.
Oh, okay.
So I thought when I married a woman, I was like,
you were safe from mispronunciations. No, but that's more.
Hair.
That has more to do with how I perceive letters and turn them in. Like there's dyslexia is literally the people think you read things backwards, but the word left and felt are not backwards. They just have the same letters. So what ends up happening is you have a problem taking visual information and converting it into phonetic information, right? So when I went to school, I learned the 44 sounds in the English language and the letter combinations that make it. So I learned oi, oo, with two O's, oi, O-I, and all of that, so that I could even fucking keep up. Oh, wow. And that was before I left my British school to go to an American school that was way subpar by my standards at the time.
I know, anytime you meet an exchange student from Germany, they're like, you only have 12 grades. And you're allowed to go to all of them. You don't even have to compete to get into the last one.
But anyway, so all right, so Danielle Winger and Danielle Winger art, and anything else that people can check you out on?
I'm in DanielleWinger.com.
Okay, cool. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a fun time. had a miserable day at work, and I didn't expect to have a 2-hour interview. So this was fun. I'll definitely have you back on. And to the listeners, thank you so much for listening. Have a good everything else.